last week's episode.
All right, so now while Oura Ring does good science, it makes a very good product. It's an exceptional company at communicating the science it does. I'm not gonna buy a Gen 3 Oura Ring. Stay tuned for next week's video to find out why. So, it's next week. So this is gonna be part 2 of my Oura Ring review, which is going to center around why I'm very hesitant to buy a Gen 3 Oura Ring and why I'm a little nervous for Oura going into the future. If you wanna watch part 1, I'm gonna put it here or here. That's for future me to decide where. And this review I split into 2 parts. The first one goes into how an Oura Ring works and how they've updated their sleep staging algorithms. It took about 25 minutes. And then this one's gonna talk a little bit more about the economics of the company. And I figured me talking for like 45 minutes is not going to be fun for anyone, including me. So we're gonna do it in 2 parts. Be sure to watch part 1 first, although you don't have to watch part 1 to get this one. Things first with this. Let's look at the features that Gen 3 has that Gen 2 doesn't have. So daytime heart rate, workout heart rate, blood oxygen levels, better sleep staging. Again, watch part 1. Better and more sensors to track temperature and other daytime heart rate features, improved battery life, chronotypes and body clock, which is basically like what time you like to fall asleep. That also is in the Gen 2 ring. I think that drains the battery, which is no fun, but oh well. And now we're getting into the part where it begins to fall apart. The $5.99 a month subscription, or $6.99 a month if you live outside of the US. So now while I don't doubt that Oura does a good job with these new features, and these new features will also improve with more software and hardware updates, I think the $5.99 a month subscription is a huge shift within how Oura operates. Oura first introduced their subscriptions for their Gen 3 ring. First, they attempted to grandfather in some Gen 2 users by making the first 6 months free. Then they faced quite a bit of backlash about trying to make those features free for only a certain period of time and created a program where you could become a lifetime member if you upgraded from Gen 2 to Gen 3 from either October 2021 to November 2021. It's a bit sudden, and for someone like me, I remember when this was happening, it was a little confusing to go, do I want to drop another $400 on something I bought literally a year ago? They rightfully faced a lot of backlash for this subscription. And they needed a way to kind of save face with customers who had already kind of invested a few $100s in an Oura Ring. So that's where kind of the grandfathering in came from, or the 1 month free came from. They're hoping you forget about it and just keep paying it. Now, before I go any further, I do want to say you can buy a Gen 3 ring without a subscription, but you'll be able to use it, but you'll only get the Gen 2 features. So none of the improvements that come from the increased number of sensors and the better data collection capabilities. So you're basically upgrading the hardware without getting any of the benefits from upgrading the hardware, which isn't exactly the point of an upgrade. The $5.99 subscription fee is a lot less than other trackers. The first one that comes to mind is Whoop, which charges you more than $40 a month for a subscription, so they're not trying to price people out with it. And I'm fascinated by how this number is going to change in the future, because it will change, it will go up. I will be shocked if it doesn't, because that's going to indicate how much Oura values some of their users, and also things like privacy. So the introduction of these subscriptions, I think, is going to mark a huge turning point in how Oura operates. The subscriptions mean it is essentially going from a hardware company, and hardware companies make money from selling objects, into a software company. And software companies make their money by selling either subscriptions that you have to pay for, or data if it's free. And in addition to kind of transitioning their model to a more software-like model, you're still gonna have to make the down payment with, like, in terms of the ring, which will run you a few $100s. So they don't care as much about the price of the ring as much as they care about the money they can extract from their pretty loyal customer base. So the shift to subscriptions signals that they're less interested in the hardware and more interested in your data. If you watch part 1, I mentioned Oura is a data collection tool. So they're not as much interested in selling the object as they are using the data. This should raise some eyebrows, because the ecosystem around data that we have isn't necessarily around unique to you healthcare data. And this is a bit more sensitive than like cat videos you watch on the internet at 2 a.m. And it's very rare that your health data, your heart rate variability, your blood oxygen levels, what time you go to sleep and wake up, is going to be paywalled by a private company with a Netflix-like recurring payment around it. This is something that hasn't happened before, and if you can almost set a precedent for this, could be how you access your healthcare data if you have one of these trackers. Now, Aura may say that this subscription is necessary to pay for new features, and they're right about that. Hardware is expensive. Hardware is difficult to manufacture. You usually have to transport hardware from a factory overseas to a US distribution and logistics network that will eventually get to your porch. That's way more expensive than just paying an engineer to write software and then putting a paywall behind it. Now, hardware companies deal with this expense by reflecting that in the price of the hardware, or by having tiers for the hardware. Every time you're buying a piece of hardware, whether it's a camera, headphones, a computer, you're trying to pick out the version or the model that's best suited for you. And sometimes you don't need all the model with the bells and whistles. The same thing applies to Aura. They're making their money by tiering out the hardware, and the hardware that is the most expensive to make has the highest price tag, and the hardware that is the least expensive to make will have the lowest price tag. Now, the hardware that's the most expensive to make should come down with scale. This is what economies of scale means. The more you make something, it will become cheaper to make. Hardware companies have pricing tiers. Gucci usually isn't involved in these pricing tiers. Like, this is basically the only tiering Aura has. Their $900-ish, I think, dollar Gucci Aura ring versus their other Aura ring. So most people who use an Aura ring aren't biohackers, so they might not want all of these features that come with an Aura ring. Instead, they might want an athlete version for workout tracking, a sleep version for sleep tracking, and then a biohacker version that just says everything else for the people who are biohackers and want everything. That could be reflected in the price of the hardware, but since Aura is choosing not to do this and only looking at the software and subscription element, it tells you they're more focused on software and data than they are producing the object. All of these layers could be tiered into the price of the hardware, but Aura has chosen not to do this. Why? Because of how much money they've raised in recent years and who they have raised it from. They raised their growth rounds in 2021 and 2022, which were bubble years, which means they are going to be tied to completely unrealistic expectations about how they are supposed to grow relative to years that weren't a response to the statistical anomaly 2020. We're raising this much money because they were a brand, and brands have unlimited license to raise money because in a pre-interest rate world, brands could keep growing and growing and growing if they could prove sticky enough with the consumer, and investors clearly saw something with Aura that was sticky enough. Now, 2020 and the pandemic and being more health conscious than we had been in the past definitely helped with that. And a lot of companies that were health companies, health tech, fitness tech, at-home fitness, were victims of this bubble because we finally had the engineered in a lab conditions for these companies to be viable. And once the world started to change and interest rates went up, they became less viable, and they're put in an insanely difficult position because there's no way they're going to be able to grow like 2020 because it isn't 2020 anymore. So in terms of the actual financials, Aura is a privately held company, so there's no official quarterly filings, and you're basically only kind of finding out what they want to tell you. Some people will try to guess their valuation, or what if they went public, their stock price would be today, or how much revenue they might be doing in a year. These are just guesses until you hear something official. Just verify, then trust, and there's no way to verify it if it's not a publicly traded company. But let's go through their most recent rounds. In 2021, they raised a $100 million Series C round. And a Series C round is the first true growth round within venture investing. These investors were primarily from software investors, and that also included people like the LA Dodgers investment arm. Yes, the baseball team has an investment arm, and some very wealthy individuals. This level of funding usually means that the company has hopefully, fingers crossed, passed some kind of financial smell test, has some form of product market fit, and has some form of tractability that shows it can grow. There's runway for it to go from like a linear line to an exponential line. That is what the people are looking for at that stage. Growth can mean two things: find new customers or find new ways to charge customers. You don't necessarily have to be finding a new critical mass. And if you're introducing subscriptions, it's a sign you aren't finding a new critical mass. So if you can demonstrate to investors that you can get a certain percentage of your clientele to pay for a ring, to pay for things they had for free in the past, you're going to get unlimited runway to capital. This doesn't necessarily mean that like people wanted it or it was financially necessary. It's going to help you be profitable, but it's going to help you grow. Growth and profit are two completely different things. Growth is how companies that aren't profitable and are probably never going to be profitable, like most startups like Aura or even some publicly traded tech companies, stay in business and keep raising money. If they can keep demonstrating that they can grow, they will get the benefit of the doubt. And hardware companies don't get that benefit of the doubt because they're not a brand, they're not sticky, and the economics of it are really, really hard. People would rather just be able to see subscription and paywall than how much does this cost to get from a factory in China to my house in America, and all of the logistics that comes in between. They don't want to deal with that. So the $100 million they raised was in 2021, which was the peak of the pandemic fueled tech bubble. This probably needed some realignment, and it meant that these bubble-like expectations might run out of room. In 2022, a new round of financing was announced. It may have been a way to indicate some realigned expectations, and this press release was a lot more perfunctory and a lot less celebratory. They raised capital. There was no dollar amount. That is intentionally vague. It also doesn't tell you if it's debt or equity. Debt is borrowing money to finance a company. Equity is selling off shares to finance a company. Already not a good sign. If companies raise equity, they usually want to tell you they raised equity. If they're not explicitly telling you that, your eyebrows should go up. Now, it could be equity. Some of these investors who participate in this round are equity investors, but since they're not explicitly saying it, be skeptical. They do tell you $2.5 billion valuation. This is good. This is continuing to go up. It's not going down. A lot of fitness tech companies went down because they raised an absurd amount of money. This doesn't seem to be happening here, which is good. They're not raising more than they're worth, which is good, and they're not slashing their valuation in half and kind of sort of maybe suggesting they want a buyer, which is a sign they can see more runway in the future, which again is good, even if they're still trying to become a software company instead of a hardware company. This also mentions 1 million Aura rings sold. This is a major milestone. But to put it in greater context, that's 1 million sold over 9 years. The company was founded in 2013. Their last press release did say it sold about 500,000 in 2021, so it did manage to sell 500,000 in a year. I would caveat by saying that might have been a bit pandemic fueled, and it might have been a bit of Gen 3 hype. I'm very curious to see what these numbers would look like in 2023 and beyond, because I wonder if they're still doing that. So there is demand, there is product market fit. These are good things, and I hope that stays that way. If there's demand and product market fit, that means you have to talk to your customers and put them first, not your investors. You have to pay attention to your customers to get product market fit. You have to pay attention to your investor to get unlimited runway to capital and not lose it. Ideally, these two things align, but given everything that's gone on in the private tech markets over the past year, that's not a guarantee. I'm not saying growth is bad, but growth should not be misaligned from what the consumer wants and what the investor wants. And it can't replace comprehensible economics. And anytime you're working with hardware that's hard and that's slow, and that's not what software investors who have gobs of money to pour into things want to see. In addition to this, the demand, not just for growth, but for software growth, means that what this new financing is doing is pricing in a failure to imagine what Aura could have been if they stayed a hardware company. A pure SaaS play, which is to charge people to use a product, is basically the only way that Aura's investors have figured out how to make money. And if they're going that route, they're paying way more attention to their investors than to their the consumer. This means that the future of Aura is going to look a lot more subscriptions, and a lot more ways to get creative with monetizing data than selling you an object and trying to empower you to live a healthier life. This could mean it begins to take its commitment to privacy less seriously, because data is the primary driver of value within software companies. I do think there are more ways to make this more profitable as a hardware company, or reach more people as a hardware company, especially if like insurance providers or HSAs or other institutions are willing to eat some of the cost of the hardware for people who aren't early adopters willing to spend $400 on a smart ring. If you're also just introducing that $599 subscription on top of that $400, you're also pricing out a pretty significant portion of the population. And that also wonders, how are you going to grow without continuing to charge people more money or trying to monetize people's data? Now, while your data is not essential to their algorithm, it is essential for them to monetize. You could take me out and they could still work fine, but they still want my data to monetize. So all of these trends are a bit alarming on a couple levels. Because Aura raised in a pandemic bubble under 2020 expectations in a year that is no longer 2020, they may never be able to get money out at a level that investors will be happy with. This means it takes a company that has a solid product, a solid business, does solid science, and tries to turn it into a place where you can extract every last subscription dollar. That is not good for the customer. That is not good for the company. That is not good for the science. Again, software companies make money through selling data or selling subscriptions. Hardware companies make money through selling objects. And the choices that Aura made when it raised at the level it did and when it did turned it into a software company and not a company whose primary goal is to use their hardware to empower you to live your best life. So far, Aura has erred on the side of selling subscriptions. This is good for everyone. And this is better for the consumer if they are willing to pay. But again, to truly be a SaaS company that uses hardware as like a down payment, they're going to have to begin to look at the data part and see if there's any money they can get from the data part. This is going to get dicey, especially if they value data privacy in the way that they say they do, especially at this $599 price point. This is a little low. If they're truly trying to extract every possible dollar out of a customer who's willing to spend $400 on a smart ring, that is probably going to go up. And again, that might not be the worst thing in privacy terms because you might be pricing out the worst possible actors here, but it's still pricing a lot of people out of a good product, and it's still a tad predatory as well because you're basically taking personal healthcare data and treating it like it's Netflix, which isn't the best thing in the world for anyone who actually uses the product and isn't trying to get the greatest possible financial return from the product. Now, while I do believe there is a lot of merit in the argument that if we all paid a minimal utility-like fee to use free software that we use every day, like health trackers, this software could get better, because these companies would be answering more to the consumer than to the lowest level bottom dollar advertiser or to their investors. And this could make the business model more sustainable in the long term. The reason I don't think that applies as clearly to Aura is because you're already spending a couple $100s to use the Aura ring, and you should have maximum ownership and control of your health data without having to consistently pay for it like it's a Netflix subscription. If their goal is truly to educate and empower, they're not going to set this up to be a subscription. Aura's probably going to pull this out again with Gen 4. Raise the subscription, paywall more features, paywall new features. It's not going to end anytime soon. The other way to look at the data part is to see how far users will go with sharing data, and Aura is already starting to do that. This summer, they introduced Aura Circles, or like a social sharing network where you could share your Aura data with your friends who also have an Aura ring. Now, you can keep what you want to keep personal there, but at the same time, they're kind of saying, could we be a healthcare social network? And do we really want that, or really need that? Is this really why people buy the product, to have yet another social network in their lives? Probably not. I kind of don't get why you would do this other than to be a guinea pig or to share something with like a medical provider, but you can do that without having to be an Aura friend or Aura sharer. What they're kind of doing here is seeing how far their customer base will grow and trying to see if they can grow with them, and see if they can turn that into a way to advertise as well. Another slightly more alarming place to look is their most recent acquisition, which is a company named Proxy. Proxy is a digital signal identity card that could be stored on mobile devices to replace keys, cards, badges, apps, and passwords. So this is basically saying Aura wants to become a digital identity provider. So they want to be a car key, they want to be a payment processor, and they want to use your biometric data to make it a one-size-fits-all thing to verify your identity, pay for things, do everything online. So this is what Gen 4 could be. No longer a hardware company that empowers you to use your healthcare data to live your best life, but your digital identity key. And if you're looking at this through the lens of our software ecosystem, that should freak you out a little. By definition, you're sharing unique physiological features that are unique to you with other companies who might be operating something like a car, a hotel, a payment through badges, cars, payments, and keys. This is gonna get to kind of be a privacy minefield. And you could potentially be set up to share this data with companies who don't take it that seriously. Now, while I'm totally willing to believe that biometric identifiers can be really, really useful to verify identity or could be useful to do payments, your fingerprint, I think we use a lot for that occasionally on a computer or on a tablet. But this acquisition and the way they're thinking about becoming a digital identity provider really begs the question, how much of this data do I need to share or want to share, or should I be willing to share? They really need to know my heart rate, my oxygen levels, all of this information for me to buy a bottle of water or to go into a hotel room or to access a rental car. This is a huge deviation from being a hardware company that helps you learn more about your body. The question is all going to come down to, how is this managed? And if the economic imperative for Aura is to extract every last subscription dollar or to come up with ways to monetize data, it's not going to be managed well. And that should be worrisome. This $5.99 subscription is not just a $5.99 subscription. It's a window into the future of Aura, where they stop being a hardware company that helps empower you and starts to become more integrated into the mess of digital software that we have and more integrated into things that have nothing to do with healthcare. They're using healthcare data to verify things that have nothing to do with healthcare. The other huge question here is that if I keep being an Aura customer, or if I eventually find a reason to want to upgrade to a Gen 3 or beyond Aura ring, am I going to have no choice but to consent to this? Because that's really not what I signed up for when I bought the ring in 2020. This does not sit well. This is, again, no longer just a hardware company who wants to help teach you about your body. It's starting to become a software company that wants to monetize your body, and that should freak you out. I'm not saying Aura is evil. I'm not saying technology is evil, but this is a little freaky. This is a huge deviation. This all comes down to how it's going to be managed, and if it's going to exclusively just be to extract every last SaaS dollar out of this, we are going to be monetizing our body, and it's not going to be good for anyone. It's not going to be about privacy or healthcare. It's going to be about returns for investors. Again, this is pricing in a failure to imagine. Aura does not have to become this. Aura could still have tried to be that company and found ways to finance hardware or use economies of scale to bring down the production of hardware and therefore bring their device to the greater population. We all need to be really smart consumers of these products and make sure we have a voice and a seat at the table. I'm not trying to say that technology is evil or tech is evil or that technology should be stopped or we can't trust medicine or we can't trust doctors. Technology, medicine, science are the best things we have. We should listen to them. We should trust them. But there are a lot of alarm bells that should be set off by a company that has deviated so much from its original mission to be a hardware company to empower you to learn more about your body, to a software company that is going to try to extract every possible dollar from your body. This doesn't live up to the initial vision of Aura and what this could have been. This is the failure to imagine. Science is the best. Using science in a way that can help us all live better and healthier lives without having to be an expert scientist is even better. Aura has proved they are a company capable of doing that. This is about wanting a better relationship between technology and capital and ensuring growth does not price out a failure to imagine what something could be if it's not just yet another freaking subscription. If you have good reason to use an Aura ring, keep using an Aura ring. I'm not saying that it's bad or it's flawed or they're trying to rip you off. They do legitimate things and it can be legitimately useful, especially if you're someone who has any sort of medical thing to track. You shouldn't be making that decision based off of what random YouTubers say. Everyone should continue to be diligent about what these changes mean for Oura in the future, as it looks more like a software company and less like the company it looked like in 2019 and 2020. Oura should always stay true to its roots to be a company that uses hardware to teach you about your body and how to live your best life. It's on us as consumers to ensure we keep pushing them in that direction. That is what they will respond to. The customer is always right, applies to everything, healthcare, Oura, technology included. It's on us to make sure we have a loud, impactful voice in that relationship. Thanks, guys. Let me know what you thought of this video. As always, hit the subscribe button, hit that little notification bell so you don't miss anything. Also, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. You a Gen 3 Oura Ring user? Let me know what you think. Did you find the subscription worth it? Let me know also what you guys want to see from this channel in the future, and I will see you next week. Thanks, everyone. Happy New Year.